Hey everyone, today we are joined by a star of the National Wrestling Alliance who also works behind the scenes. He's been seen in Championship Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, TNA Wrestling, and all over the world. This is the second time we've been fortunate enough to talk to him. Captain Johnny Yuma, thank you so much. Lars Only, you have so many names. I love it.
Too many. And you should, I mean, I had so many. I wanted to be like a million different gimmicks. I think I talked about it last time how much I loved SNL and watching different people be completely different characters and you like kind of let it slide. Like, oh my God, I was Mr. Gimmicks, in my living room and on my parents' bed. I would come up with a million different characters. I wanted to be this guy, I want to be that guy, this guy, that guy. And I was like, there's no way. You can't be all those things.
I love it. And you still need to bring back Johnny Mahalo sometime. It's just great. It's great.
I did. Did I tell you? I don't know if I mentioned that.
No,
Yeah, I did
you
that in a battle royal. Yeah, I did it in a battle royal. It was like one of the last New Wave Pro shows, which is where I debuted in San Diego. Um, it was like one of their last shows, and like I went out as Yuma in some long tights. I still had my long hair. It was blonde and streaky. I think it was like 2012 or 13, probably 12. Yeah, no, and then so I went out early in the Rumble, the San Diego Rumble or whatever it was, New Wave Pro Rumble, and I got dumped as Yuma, full gear, everything, entrance jacket, and all that crap. And then I came back later in just board shorts, barefoot, and the stupid towel and everything. And like, diehard fans remembered. They thought it was really funny. And I slipped too. I ate it on my entrance, like not even on purpose. I slipped on water from some stupid, dumping the fired up guy for this Rumble, covered himself in water. And I slipped and I just stood up and said wipe out. And like 40 people rolled their eyes at me. And I
That's
was just like,
amazing though. Honestly, what a good way to cover for it.
it hurt too. I was
Oh,
so butthurt because it hurt. And I'd gotten like hurt earlier in the match too. Like someone gave me a German suplex
in a
that
battle
was not.
royal.
Yes, in a battle royal, like like I thought we were teasing it. I thought we were just playing, a little up and down, get near the ropes, and then like he just dumped me, and I was like, "What the?" It was a rough day, but it was a fun one.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so let's jump right into plugs before we get into
Yeah.
the interview. Where can people check you out? What should people check out? All that fun stuff.
The best place to find me is always on Twitter and Instagram, same name at Yuma Booma, Yumabooma. And then, as always, you can find a lot of my matches on YouTube by searching Johnny Yuma, or of course the Rock Ness Monsters. And then always be tuning into Power and NWUSA, where I work very hard behind the scenes to make that show super fun.
Hey, and Pro Wrestling Tees. Don't forget to get some Rockness Monster
Yes,
shirts at
yes,
Pro Wrestling Tees.
prowrestlingtees.com/Rockness, Rockness.
And we will, of course, have links to all that in the description of every video, guys. Make sure to support them and subscribe to us while you're at it. Thank you. So we last left off and we had a great 2 hour chat. I really appreciate all the time you gave. And we last left off right in 2010. You were just starting with Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, and it was a very interesting time because before that you had a lot of ups and downs, and you know you had almost like a crisis of conscience with if you wanted to do this, if you could do it, and then you realized or you knew you wanted to, and that even bothered you more that you weren't. You got into it, you were breaking out, the Rock Ness Monsters formed. We left off. You had a match with Brian Cage in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. How did that opportunity actually come about? Because I know you were grinding for it for a while. Who reached out to you to get you into Pro Wrestling Guerrilla?
So at that time, I was, we were doing those Mach 1 shows every single Friday. Johnny and the ring announcer for PWG, longtime ring announcer for PWG, that was his company. So, and then guys like, me, Peter, and Willie, everyone was saying, "Hey, look, you're probably next in line. You're next in line." Good time, BHK. He was already there. He'd already been there for quite a few months. He was even in Ebola against Roderick Strong, I think. And so it's kind of like, I mean, we'll get the call. We know enough guys that work there. Someone's going to hit us up. So, we're all just kind of hoping for it. And then at the time, it was Joey Ryan that would kind of relay that from Super Dragon when somebody was needed or whatever. And so I remember it was like I was living on a floor at the time with my girlfriend, now lovely wife. And I just remember I was laying on my stomach. It was like super hot. We had the door completely open just to get some air. And I was like eating peanut butter out of a jar. And then I just get this text and it just said, uh, it's either you or Willie versus Brian at PWG in October. And I was just like, oh shit. Joey had texted me that. And then he was just like, who do you think it should be? And I was like,
Oh,
why are you asking me? I
what
was like,
what
that's
an
not
odd
up.
position to be put in.
Yeah, and I was like, Willie's like one of my absolute best friends on the planet. I was just like, either of us, man. And then it kind of just came down to like, well, who could Brian maybe like not I mean, he's always been strong. He could pick up Willie. He's always been able to, throw Willie around. But I think it just came down to like, well, who would be more entertaining to get whooped by Brian? Because Brian was slightly established there, not too long himself, but obviously a big, talented guy that people were starting to get really behind. And then Willie, everyone, even people that went to PWG, they absolutely knew Willie. They knew him because he was a diehard that was there in the crowd from day one, and they all wanted to see him there. They would go see him all over Southern California, lucha shows, AWS, Mach 1. So it's like uh I've kind of lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
What you're talking about, how Joey
Oh
Ryan
yeah,
had
it was
asked.
like what would kind of be better for Brian? Like should he just kind of run through Yuma or like kind of have a 50-50 with Willie, even though Willie's new, so still, Brian would probably come out on top and get to look better because it was still Willie's audition. Willie was still a rookie in a lot of people's eyes. In my eyes, he wasn't. He was my vet. He'd been working longer than me. I would listen to him. I learned a lot from him. Uh, Willie, yeah, he's such a fun, entertaining guy. People don't realize, I think, how smart he is when it comes to, what to do out there.
I guess it's important
Obviously,
to
man.
note that there are like there's kind of levels, right? Where you have your local indie, and then you have the bigger local indie, and then you have a place like PWG, which are like quote unquote super indies, and then obviously
Yes,
you have your
exactly.
television companies from there. So while somebody could be a veteran in their local indie, they're not necessarily a veteran in a super indie, or they don't necessarily have that same status. So it's a different situation.
Exactly, you're right. There's levels to it. And so yeah, I think they just decided like, well, Brian beating the shit out of Yuma would probably be a lot of fun. Um and so I think that's just why they picked me. And Willie debuted the show right after that, and that was when like me and Peter were like, oh, who's gonna be first? He debuted at Scott Lost last show, which was like the July one, I think. And then I debuted on the October one, and then Willie debuted on the December one. So all three of us back to back like hit our goal of being in PWG. And it was really cool. Like, I mean, I was so stoked that we all kind of did it like that. After my match with Brian, like I went out and celebrated with Peter. We had dinner together. It was awesome. It was cool for all of us to be like, we're gonna do this, and then we did it. And it came from thanks to Johnny. And honestly, obviously he was putting in a word for his talents from Mach 1 when it in Super Dragon's ear. Joey was the head trainer there, so he was kind of doing the same, like, hey, these students are good or not good enough for PWG, but like he's like, hey, these guys are on the way. These guys are on the shows every Friday. So it's like Mach 1 was really kind of what got me, Willie, and Peter to PWG. It absolutely was. AWS was another place that people would see us, that kind of, had some say in the area. But when it comes down to it, Super Dragon just picks who he wants. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. You could be the most over guy on the planet and he'd be like, I don't care. I don't like his work. And that's just the truth. And there's nothing wrong with it. A lot of people think it's harsh. A lot of people think Super Dragon's mean, but it's cut and dry. Like he's got an idea of what he wants his show to be, and he doesn't care like if you're The Rock. If The Rock tried to get booked, he'd probably be like, I don't know. And that's just that's just how it is. So for us to
He
get
just
that
has his taste,
okay,
right? His own
yeah,
unique taste.
absolutely. And it's funny because obviously he watches everybody before they get there. He's PWG is it's elite. It's taken very seriously. So he had obviously watched whatever matches I'd sent Joey to send to him. But I got there and I looked at I didn't have my gear on. You can't see my tattoos. Whatever, I showed up and I remember I went up to him. I was like, hey, how you doing? My name's Andrew. It's nice to meet you. And Super Dragon looked at me and he just went, okay. Are you ring crew? And I was just like, oh no, I'm Johnny Yuma. I'm booked tonight. And he was just like, oh, okay, awesome. I think you're up first. It's you and Brian. Brian's up. Have fun. And I was just like, oh, okay, sweet. And that was it. Literally, that was it. He trusted us. And that took a lot of my nerves away because I was nervous, but not really. And a lot of why I wasn't nervous was also because of Willie. Because Willie would be like, guys, guys that wanted to be on it so bad, they'd be like, oh, I don't know, man. I don't know if I could hang. I don't know if I could do that. Ooh, the crowd is so harsh because the crowd at PWG used to be
Yeah.
brutal, brutal. It was like as smart and like deep critiqued as possible. People were there looking for mistakes. It wasn't what it is now where it seems to have gotten, I mean, there's still those fans, there always will be, but it's gotten a lot more lighthearted and enjoyable, I think, for
It's
both the
almost like a
talent and the fans.
celebration now, while back then it was like people looking to critique in a way.
Yeah, dude, it felt like a damn freaking I mean, I'm no martial artist, but whatever your like black belt test is, like that's what it like would feel like. But Willie was just like, so what? It's just another show. And I was like, we should probably treat it as more than that. And he's like, it's a show. He's like, what's the difference? He's like, there's a crowd, there's a ring, and you're wrestling. He's like, it's a show. Why are you nervous? And I was like, goddamn, okay. And he was right. He was right, and being kind of just told, like, yeah, Brian's up, have fun. That to have that faith in our first match. I mean, and like maybe, obviously they trusted Brian. He'd been on a few shows, so but whatever is basically like, yeah, just go out there and do your thing, do whatever it was that got you here and do it your best. So me
That's
and
super
Brian went
cool.
out there. Brian and I wrestled each other so many times. The Rockness Monsters and Natural Selection were married. We wrestled damn near every Friday night and the occasional Saturday and Sunday shows. Like we wrestled Natural Selection for like a year straight,
So
like all
before
of
this,
2010.
or
Like yeah, end of '09. Like once Rockness formed in because Rockness formed in September in San Diego, but not until like almost December, I think, in no, not even. It was like spring that they finally let us team in Mach 1, and then which turned into like, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood and all that stuff. And we literally wrestled Ricker LA Knight, as he is known now, and Brian Cage. We wrestled them almost every Friday. Like we just tag teams or singles, and then we would switch to singles, and then we would do tornado tag, and then we would add a six man from another feud, or two singles guys from another feud, and it was a six man. Like I wrestled them so many times. So me and Brian just, we gelled, we had chemistry, and we always have too. Any other time we touched in PWG or anywhere really, me and Brian have always worked really well together, which is, I would think you would kind of assume unexpected. A guy that size could literally do whatever he wants to me, and all he ever has done for me is taken care of me and made me look good, and and I've always made sure I'm there to make him look good too. I kind of don't have a choice because he's so strong, but you know what I mean.
so you have nothing but good things to say about Brian Cage, and it's not a surprise that he's a star on television today. That's for sure.
I mean, he looks like the prototype of what a pro wrestler would be, and just early on being that young, I had only been wrestling for like almost like barely not even 3 years when I debuted in PWG. And so uh he had already been in and out of WWE, he was in FCW, all this stuff. He
Right.
literally could have treated me however he wanted, both physically and, vetting me, but he just made sure that everybody looked good and we had a good time and nobody got hurt.
Now,
So I
just for
mean,
my
my
own
debut,
reference, was
yeah.
this when he was getting into the fully jacked Brian Cage that fans have gone on to know, or was he? Because I know at one point there was a smaller Brian Cage, and then he just got huge.
I
Was this like
mean,
in the middle, or was he
he was
already?
I mean, he was a big dude. He was still a big dude, but coming fresh out of SCW, he wasn't quite as big as he was. Yeah, he was like, yeah, I would say it was like a middle phase because he actually got really like still jacked, but
Mhm.
like cut up for a couple bodybuilding competitions. And then after that, it just was bigger, bigger, bigger,
Gotcha,
bigger, bigger,
gotcha.
bigger, bigger. Yeah. So I mean, he still looked great, looked better than everybody else at Mach 1 on Fridays. Him and Ricker were definitely the example of who to look at. We would have Scorpio Sky would be there on Fridays sometimes too. He was another guy that everyone was like, all right, we got to look, got to try to look good, got to look like a star, got to look like a star. And that helped a lot of us younger guys, Me and Peter were tiny.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, like, and we got judged on that a lot, especially in PWG. People would always say Peter was too scrawny, And I was literally the bar for how small you could be. Because guys would send tape and shit all the time, especially locals. They'd come help out, and the like Super Dragon was like, no, they can't be smaller than Yuma. That's too small. And, like he would just say it that cut and dry, that casual. Like that was just his thing. He's like, no, you gotta at least be as big as Yuma. And I worked hard. I lifted weights all the time. I did everything I could. I was just a small guy. I'd gone from being really overweight to really cut up, and then working my way up to being muscular and like buffer was a lot of work. It took years. It took years for me to get my big boy body.
I think there's something to be said though about, you were the small guy on a roster.
Mhm.
Because it's the big man effect. If everybody's big and jacked, nobody's big and jacked. If everybody's a giant, nobody's a giant. If everybody's small and athletic, nobody's really small and athletic. So I can kind of see the vision where you're the smaller guy. You're the one who can bounce around. You're the one who can get surprising wins. It's your role. And if you start diluting that by having multiple people do the same thing, it starts mattering less.
Yeah, honestly, that's a really good way to look at it. And it's like, like I was the small guy. Uh, and then Peter kind of got pigeonholed as like a comedy guy, and a lot of that
Mhm.
had to do with because he was smaller too. And then he obviously proved that like they were like, oh wait a minute, this guy can really work. He wasn't just there to make everybody else look good. And look at him now. He looks like $1 million, works like 10 times that, and he's on AEW. So it's just funny how yeah he was kind of pigeonholed as we were both the smallest guys there, and then he was like the like haha like I don't know. I feel like that probably would have been me as well. We would have maybe even been together had it not been for Rockness. By the second show, they teamed me and Kevin. At the end of me and Brian Cage, he was a Brian Cage Taylor. They added him to the Fighting Taylor Boys with Chuck and Russ, and they beat me down after. And then Rocky Romero and Kevin, good time made the save to set up a 6-man on the next show. Never happened, but it established me and Kevin and the people that knew in the seats, in the crowd, they knew. And then on the next show, we teamed against the Cutler brothers. So, um, I think had me and Kevin not been a team and I made it there as a singles, I think yeah, I would have been, when the get whooped around haha guy, or just me and Peter would have been the team that just gets whooped around.
Russ Taylor, there's another name I'm hoping to possibly interview in the future. I sent a message. Definitely had an interesting career. Peter Avalon,
Oh
you
yeah.
you mentioned quite a bit. Could you just
Mhm.
talk about meeting him, your friendship with him over the years? Just give us a rundown on your relationship with Peter Avalon and what you think of him as a performer in person.
Well, I first heard of Peter because of like I think it was the Rookie of the Year poll, or he was Rookie of the Year for EWF, and I remember seeing that online, and I remember like I remember I was like a hater. I was like that guy. I don't know. I've just always been a jerk. And I was just like really, and then he right before met him, uh, no, I met him at an EWF show. Just briefly, just said hello, and then he cut his hair. He was pretty hair Peter Avalon. He cut his hair, and I remember being like, "Oh my God, like this guy's a dumbass. Like why?" And it's funny. He and I just talked about this the other day. I was like, "This idiot just cut his gimmick off. Like his name was Pretty Hair Peter Avalon, and now he cut all his beautiful hair off." Uh, and then so whatever, like a couple months go by, like 2 months go by, I think, and then I was in the cruiserweight cash out match in EWF, which was something where they would kind of pull in guys from other cities. It was kind of like this like 6-man thing. It was like elimination style, just some crappy scramble. And it would be like their best cruisers, and then some randos, and I was one of the randos that year. And I met Peter, and like actually met him, and we were gonna be in this match together. So I was like, all right, dude, like you don't actually know this guy. You've only seen what's on MySpace. Because that's still what we were using. SoCal Uncensored MySpace. You don't know this dude.
I love it.
You're just like go with an open head or an open mind, and because I knew some of the guys in the match. I'd already been on shows in San Diego with them or whatever. But Peter, we met and we just clicked right away. I just remember we were just horsing around in the locker room right away, got each other's number. We were just texting, and then we started being on Mach 1 or AWS together. And we would hang out even more, and then we would go hang out after. and like I started hanging out with him. He was tight with Sky because Sky was from the Inland Empire, and like kind of like Peter was one of his younger guys that he helped guide a little bit, and then I became one too. And so like we just kind of all ended up clicking up, and Peter is just he's been one of my best friends now for shoot 13, 14 years almost. Like we were always each other's kind of like benchmark, like, okay, I got to get where he's at. He's there, I got to get there. We used to work out together every Friday before Mach 1, and then we would go probably wrestle each other and beat the crap out of each other, and then go to Del Taco after. And so we were glued, every step of the way from EWF, and then he was the AWS light heavyweight champion, and then like he was rookie of the year or something like that, and then I was rookie of the trying to go for rookie of the year, and like we were always just doing this. He got to PWG first, I was next, and then I got to TNA, and then he got to TNA, and then stayed in TNA, and then he even got me a little gig again. Like, so we're just I don't know. He's just as when you use the term brother in wrestling, a lot of people throw it around, but he is a brother. He was in my wedding party. We actually have what we call the Frozen Tundra series. We wrestled in Alaska, where he retained the Hollywood Heritage title. We wrestled in front of a like glacier on the 4th of July. It was awesome. And then we wrestled again in negative 17-degree weather. We were inside, but in North Dakota, the Canadian border, and I won. So
There
now
you
we're
go.
1-1, and we have wanted to settle the score somewhere super cold. We had tried to get on those death tours
In Canada,
up,
yep.
yeah, those tip top of Canada ones. We were like, oh, we got to get on one of those, or we could just wrap it up there. But we've never been able to make that work. So one of these days we got to have one more Peter Avalon. I'll see you in the ring in the snow somewhere.
Definitely gonna have to put that in the title somewhere in the promotion of the video. Just Johnny Yuma challenges Peter Avalon to fight in the snow.
One more match.
But no, that's great. That's great. And he's a guy who I personally think, even with his success, he's underrated because I think sometimes people throw him in the box of, he's just a comedy guy, and he's great at it. But I think he's also just tremendous at everything I've seen him do. He's great.
I think I know for a fact. I mean, I searched the internet. I was looking Twitter. I was searching his name. Him and Jericho turned a lot of heads.
Yeah.
He really took it to one of the best to ever do it. And he showed a different side that I've always known. Hell, I felt that. Me and Peter were damn near killed each other in Championship Wrestling from Hollywood over the stupid heritage title, man. I have felt his fury, and to watch him do that to, one of the all-time greats on national TV, like how cool. And I think it turned a lot of heads. Peter's going to show people what he's always been capable. We've always known. His boys out here know. The fans in SoCal know. The promoters out here know. We know what Peter's always been capable of, and now people are going to start seeing that. I am positive that Peter's going to turn a lot of heads this year.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when talking about PWG, Super Dragon is the main guy. It wasn't always the case as far as I know. I know at one point it was kind of like there was like I think was it 4 or 6 guys who when PWG first started.
The PWG 6.
Yeah, there we go.
Scott Lost, Joey Ryan, Super Dragon, Excalibur, Disco Machine, and Top Gun Talwar.
Okay.
They were the like founding 6 of PWG, if I remember right. And then there were some other early like mainstays, like Chris Bosch, Scorpio Sky, but like the actual like founding guys. Well, I mean, I think it was Disco Machine's card that paid for everything. But yeah, those were the 6 guys that had started it. But even then, I think, it started as kind of like a group, like think tank kind of thing. And I really don't know where the shift is to, Excalibur and Super Dragon being the decision maker. Everyone else kind of, fizzling away or, not wrestling as much like Top Gun. I don't really know when or where that happened because I met everybody. I feel like 2 years after that is when I even met any of these people. So I kind of missed all that. By the time I was there, it was, Excalibur and Super Dragon, with Super Dragon doing all the booking and Excalibur, I think doing, a lot of the other, well, I mean, Super Dragon does damn near everything to my knowledge. So yeah, it was kind of those guys. But yeah, before it was the 6, there were guys from Rev Pro, SoCal, they were tired of companies bringing in dope guys and SoCal guys not getting brought anywhere. It's the same. The story's never changed. And then the idea of the company was to put the best in Southern California against these people they may never get to wrestle, and it just blew up.
When I'm curious about the structure of PWG, because you talked about Super Dragon was just like, oh, you're in the opener, and really didn't seem to give much more oversight than that. Was that always the case in PWG? Was there anybody who, because I'm not expecting the kind of structure you get in the NWA or other, televised companies where there's an agent and this and that. But was there anybody going around and checking in on matches, or was it mostly just, hey, go do your thing. We want this to be the finish or this to be the story and go?
No, I mean, there was still like I remember, there was always like a run sheet with the match order, and if you had like if there was a specific no for anything, but and then Excalibur would go around and just get any notes like, hey, any new names for anything you're doing tonight, that's. But yeah, I mean, so there was definitely structure there, but it was just. I think at that point it's like, hey, if you're here, there's a lot of trust in you being good enough. As long as you stick to your time, because that was big. If you went long, oh man, you'd get yeah. You don't go over your time. If you're gonna go over your time, it better be the best goddamn match ever.
I love that though. I find the structure of wrestling so fascinating, especially on the independent scene, because there are companies of various levels who just do things completely different and completely out of the book. And I hope we get to talk more about the NWA, but I do want to just chime in with the NWA today because you work behind the scenes with the NWA, and I'm not sure exactly what your roles are there, but do you have any part in the structure and agenting of the show?
Yeah, so I'm one of the, I guess you would call me like a line producer or a floor director. I'm not really sure. I queue a lot of talent for certain things. I do agent matches with a lot of the younger talent. I I'm kind of like a all hands everywhere thing, because when I ran Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, it was kind of the same situation. I did everything. I would hand off certain matches to talent on the show I really trusted. If there was like a certain story needing to be told, like if there's like a really technical match on Hollywood, I would be like, hey, Ryan Taylor, I'd be like, can you go work with them and make sure that they tell this story? And I would trust him to do it right, But other than that, because I booked the matches and I booked so far ahead, I would like be like, hey, it's you and you today, but like I would just agent everything. That's just how I was at Hollywood, and it's probably there was good and bad to that. It probably would have been better, or I mean, more variety out of certain things because I do have certain ways I like stuff, and it may not, and it's not always right. So that could have been better, but because I did everything at Hollywood, everything but direct, and I was about to learn how. Billy Trask, the director of NWA, was teaching me how to direct and live cut, and I know I would have been good at it, but I never really got enough time on the old switcher. So but because of that, at NWA, yeah, I mean, I kind of do a little bit of everything. I'll be in the promo room sometimes. I'll be, with the slow motion or, with the like the other footage that like the extra footage team, the social media team. I just kind of I do pretty much everything.
Cool, cool. Apologies if there's any delay for people watching the video. There was some slight connectivity issues during that, but I think all the audio should be fine.
Sweet.
And there's so much to dive into, and I find your career very interesting. And again, before we jump into the Pro Wrestling Gorilla even further, in 2010 you also had a dark match for Ring of Honor in Arizona. How did the opportunity come about? Was it through Adam Pearce? Because I know in the last video we talked extensively about your relationship with Adam Pearce. He's a channel favorite. Everybody loves him. What happened?
Yeah, well, so I had done that dark. I had done a dark match at ROH TVs in Philadelphia in '09. Adam got me that. I was in a tag there,
Well,
and
what was
then
that one then? Because I apologize, I must have messed my notes up. I was thinking 2010. What was the first one, and how did that opportunity come about?
the first one was I was just literally in Philly for something else, and I had just reached out to Adam, and he was like, "Hey." You can crash on the floor in my room. Don't wake me up. I'll get you a match. And I was like, okay. And so I went with him to the building pretty early. I was helping set up. I met a lot of guys that I would see go on to do like really like I don't know, just great things. Like I just remember specifically hanging out with the Bravado brothers, watching them. I asked that, and they're like, "Oh, we come all the way from North Carolina for these," and I was like, "Holy crap! Like these kids, like these dudes really, really care." And then we got Andre Chase now in NXT, one of the Bravado brothers, still going strong. And I just, I helped out. I did whatever I was asked, and like, okay, yeah, we can get you a match. It's gonna be a tag. It's you and Gregory Versetti versus Kyle Matthews. Yeah, Kyle Matthews from Georgia and Bobby Dempsey. And they're like, you
All
guys
right.
have this long. If you take too long, you're gonna get your ass whooped. But we're gonna send out I think it was
Dar-
the American Wolves. Yeah, at the
okay.
time.
Because I know like they also sent like the Dark City Fight Club out to just destroy people. It was an interesting period.
It might have been Dark City at the time. I can't remember. I think it was still the Wolves because this was
Yeah.
like fall of '09. But so that was the first time. And then I was in Arizona shooting a reality show for A&E called Strange Days with Bob Saget. Kleinrock had hooked me and Watts up with that. We were on there with a couple other people from SoCal and then some people that we'd never met before. A dude named Brad Bad from Tennessee. Actually, it was mostly SoCal guys. My buddy Jason Redondo, who was a longtime wrestler. He was his what was his thing? He's one of the many people getting squashed in all those Yokozuna Banzai videos.
Oh, right, right.
So it was me. Man, I mean, I was glued to Watts. He's one of my like day one. Like he's again, the way I talked about Peter is the way I talk about Watts. He is my brother. We met on my very first New Wave show. I actually saw him wrestle before that when I went to that SoCal Pro Show and saw Good Time again. He was on one of those matches. I was like, "Oh, this guy's dope." And then I would read on him online. But so me and him, we were able to have each other's backs at this reality show thing, and it was shooting like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and like the end of it was one of us would get picked to wrestle on the Dragon Gate USA show on Saturday night, the night before WrestleMania. Um, and there was an ROH show in the afternoon on Saturday. And so I didn't get picked. Um, I mean, that's a freaking hour long story right there. The whole Bob Saget thing. I mean,
I'll definitely want to
long,
dive into that after too.
yeah, yeah. I mean, long story short, honestly, it was a reality TV show. They came to my house. They filmed my daily life. It was supposed to be this whole episode about pro wrestling, but it ended up only being like a tiny segment of an episode that covered backyard wrestling, lucha, and independent wrestling. So we shot so much that never saw the light
So
of
wait,
day. But
what was the show exactly about? Like,
it was called Strange Days. It was Bob Saget going into basically very tiny like subcultures in America.
mhm.
So like bikers, I know it was bikers, pro wrestling, uh, billiard, rodeo, like just weird walks of life,
Yeah,
pretty much. And so they brought us out to Phoenix. They put us up in a hotel. We had dinner with Bob. It was awesome. We did a photo shoot for Maxim magazine with Bob, and like he came with us to Walgreens to get baby oil and like all this stuff. It was a lot of fun, man. He was so freaking cool. Like seriously, like I had chicken parm with Bob Saget,
that's
and
awesome.
we had a blast, man. And me and Watts had a good time. We got really, really close as friends on that trip because of feeling like kind of felt like we were up against the wall a few times. I remember I got heat right away because we were doing the photo shoot for the Dragon Gate US. It was in the Dragon Gate USA ring, and they had just gotten a new mat, and like the red paint on it was ruining all the gear that we had spent a lot of money on each of us to be on this TV show, and to try out for this company. And the freaking ring is like getting red paint all over us. And I had said something about it. I was like, "Hey, I don't know what needs to be done, but that's probably got to get taken care of before the weekend's shows." And like that just I shouldn't have said anything. Oh, yeah, like,
Oh boy.
yeah, I had really pissed off Gabe Sapolsky, who was in charge of Dragon Gate USA at the time, and that weekend specifically, and he was one of the judges for who would be picking the judges for who would get chosen to wrestle Yamato, I believe. No, Yoshino? No. God damn it, I can't remember. I feel like I'm mixing up the names, but you were I don't even remember because I was so mad I didn't win. But yeah, so you're gonna wrestle somebody on the Dragon Gate USA show. They picked Luke Hawx. The judges were Gabe Sapolsky, Paul London, Shingo, Bob Saget, and one of the office from Dragon Gate Japan. And the finals came down to me and Luke after a series of tag matches where they were just kind of reviewing us. It didn't matter who went over in the matches; they were looking at who stood out as a performer. And then it came down to me and Luke in a singles. And then they chose him, and then he wrestled on the Saturday show. But in the afternoon, I was free until we needed to be at the show because
So
they
the
had to
show
film.
went into this much detail. Sorry to interrupt, but the show went into this much detail with everything because I
Oh,
was,
dude, yeah, they filmed two separate tag matches which got turned into one more tag match. So it was like two from each were supposed to get chosen, but it was actually my home or just two from each. I don't remember what happened, but yeah, it was supposed to be somebody from each match, but one of the other matches was not good at all. So it ended up being like all of our match got to do another tag match, and then two of us did a singles, and they filmed all of it, dude. Every match, every bit of it, all of us, planning the matches, everything. Roddy Piper came and talked to us before we wrestled. It was really cool. They did air that. That was one of the only parts that did air. He gave us kind of like a pep talk, asked us why we do what we do, and it was really cool. Um, and I had broken my nose twice in one day while filming this.
ooh,
They filmed me break my own nose at my house in my ring in my backyard. And I was like, oh, great. Like, that's what's going to air for sure. And they even said it. They're like, yeah, man, sorry. Like, we got to keep filming. And I was like, oh, please don't. I was so embarrassed because, like, my foot got caught because I didn't roll the tarp off my ring all the way that I
mm,
covered it for rain. And I was showing them some warm up rolls. And then I went to do another, and my heel got caught in it. And I literally just bent over and slammed my face into my own
oh,
knee. And I stood up, and it was just like, gushing blood, and I was getting dizzy, and I was like, oh shit. And they were like, oh, what the hell? Are you okay? And I was like, I don't think so. And I had a show that night. And so I was like, hey, I was wrestling Brian Cage and Sean Ricker. And I had told Brian, like, hey, be everybody, I was like, hey, just don't touch my face. I was like, just, chops, clubs, everything else tonight. Just, nothing to the face, please. No punches. I don't even want to have to like try to cover. And they're like, that's fine. We can work around it. And I was like, bumps are fine. Like, don't worry about it. And then just on some regular in and out when me and Good Time were in control, tagging, all that, whatever. I go to get in the ring and he starts fighting back on Good Time and he throws a big punch to hit Good Time in the ribs and he breaks my nose the other way.
oh.
So I broke my nose at like 11 a.m. at my house. Uh, Drove to Anaheim 2 hours, and then I was there like I got there at like 5. Everyone's like, you shouldn't wrestle, and then I was like, no, I want to. I know I can get around it. And then I got broken again like 2 hours later. So I broke
Did
it
it end up
twice.
making the cut? Did they show the broken
Uh,
nose?
none of it did. No, none of
Oh,
it.
wow.
But there's a cool picture of my hands covered in blood from that match because I still got the hot tag in that match. I rolled out. Uh, Good Time took some heat, and then when it's time for the hot tag, I came off the top rope and my hands are just covered in blood, and I'm doing a crossbody. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so that's all that made the episode was me looking at Roddy Piper during the pep talk with two completely black eyes and like the ugliest nose you've ever seen.
Wow, that's crazy. And then you had the
That's all
tag
that made
match.
the cut.
So you ended up not getting picked for the Dragon Gate USA tryout or the
Yeah.
showcase match. So that somehow led to the Ring of Honor second appearance.
Yeah, because I was I had they gave me I was rooming with David Flex, who is on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood or United now. And he we had a room and like, Scorpio Sky and Scott Lost were on the Friday and Saturday ROH shows. Uh and so they we let them stay in our room. I was like, bro, we didn't pay for this room. Hell yeah. So we hooked up our vets and I was like, Sky, you can have my bed and shit, like whatever. I was happy to share the room with them. They'd always been good to me and helped me out. And so, we got to hang out with them a little bit and they're like, well, do you want to come watch the show? And Good Time was actually booked on the Saturday night show, I believe. No, he was on the Friday night show. He was actually booked and then he was just still in town. And then I was like, hey, I'm coming with Sky and Scott uh to the show to see if we can get on. And we were there and Adam was like, oh, you guys have your gear? And we were like, of course. And he's like, okay. And so we did a 6-man. It was us and Mike Seidel against Anchors Away, who were the guys who broke me into the industry with New Wave Pro, and Archie RD Evans
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Texas. Yeah, yeah, that was a 6-man. It was awesome. Honestly, I wish it was on the main show. It was short, it was sweet, and everything went great. It was a lot of fun.
Completely off topic, but loosely related. And I'm sure you know by now, this is how our chats go. With a lot of
It's all
people,
right.
I'll have an hour chat. We'll hit all the high points, and that's it. But I like to break in. I like to get into the grid of everything because I'm a big wrestling nerd. So that everything is curious to me. So I will ask 10 minutes about the dumbest thing that nobody cares about just because it interests me. And this is going to be one of those things. Uh, dark
I'm down, man.
matches.
Let's go.
Dark matches. I understand the concept, especially for, television and, maybe even for DVD releases and stuff. What do you think about dark matches on the indies in general? Like, it's a little different with NWA because NWA, they have television, Championship Wrestling, they have their show. What do you think of the concept of dark matches? Before, your local indie, they have 7 matches on the main show, and then they have 2 matches ahead of time that they call the dark match that nobody's going to see anyway. And one interesting point I heard recently that I'd love your thoughts on. I think it was from Jim Cornette, actually. He doesn't really understand the point of putting on these dark matches with green guys ahead of the show because you're conditioning the audience to just see not necessarily the best wrestling right when a show starts. What are your thoughts on that? Because I've never thought of it from that perspective before, ever. So I thought it was interesting.
I mean, I'm not big on that. I don't think an indie that's not being like, I mean, if you're recording and releasing like bigger shows, obviously like super indies like that, but even PWG never had like dark matches. ROH, it kind of made sense because they were usually taping either something for, HD net or a big DVD release. So sometimes having what are more like buffer matches than dark matches, although they are dark in that they do not air. That kind of makes sense. But yeah, like on your regular old indie, it's like, dude, if the guy's not ready, don't throw him out there at all. Certainly don't throw him out there first because that's when the crowd is going to be their freshest, which isn't the fairest way to determine because they're kind of ready to see anything. So if it goes even a little well, it's going to give them a false sense of accomplishment. Like, oh, it's like, no, man, you had the crowd when they were at their easiest. Being first is the best.
Mm-hmm.
If you know anything about any wrestler who doesn't want to go first, just trip
Yeah,
because it is the best. You get to set the tone. You get them when they're hungry. And you're right, doing those like dark matches before it, then that true match one, they're not that hungry anymore. They had some stale chips on the table before the appetizers came.
it's a good way
And
of putting it.
so it's just like in that regard, I absolutely agree. I wouldn't throw the green guys out there, especially not first. If anything, throw them right after intermission in a multi-man match where they're not going to be exposed. Team them with a vet or put them in a 6-man, that's structured and controlled by guys that know what they're doing. That way they at least can learn to be in front of a crowd and have to respond to them, to more than just your classmates or fellow trainees, whatever. That's the best way to do it, I think. Throwing out a guy, in a 3-minute match with a guy who really knows what they're doing doesn't really do them that much benefit. Yeah, they're in front of a crowd, but it's not a true crowd in that you're getting them when they're either A, not focused because they're not sitting down yet, which is also not a fair barometer for anything. Or again, they're hot, they're hungry, and you did one drop kick that looked pretty hot and you got a big pop, so now you think you're the shit. It's not beneficial.
Makes
Uh, you
sense.
know, yeah, but a dark match in terms of TV is good because they're good enough to be at TV, but you need to see if they're
Yeah.
good enough to be on it. Which way do they, do their stuff? Do they look the right direction at when it's time for this and that? So that makes sense too. But yeah, in the terms of general indies, I don't think it makes sense. Wrestle in front of your classmates until it's time to have a match. And that match should be with people that are better than you. That way you can listen and you can learn and you can make mistakes without hurting anybody and that you can learn from. That's the way to do it. I'm always big on guys being like, if there's four experienced guys and two pretty new guys. That's a good way for those two new guys to learn. And again,
Well,
don't put them first because that's not fair. That's not fair to the guys who earn and deserve to be first and get that kind of easy night with the hot crowd. And it's just, it's not a true reading of whether or not you had connected with them in any way.
plus, we did talk about the merits of squash matches and short matches and enhancement
Yeah.
talent, however you want to word it, in the last interview. And it seems like if instead of throwing those out in the beginning, if you sprinkle them in throughout the show to help the pacing of the show, the ups and downs. Again, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just throwing out my thoughts as a
Nope.
fan, and but to me, that would seem like a better way to balance the show than throwing it all out in the beginning. And this is my
Yeah,
thought process.
you just it's the same. It's the same with anything. You only get to make one first impression, and once that first bell rings for the night, that is your first impression on the crowd, and it should be your best foot forward, not an experiment. You bring your A game to shows, and if you need to throw a little B or C in there for a dip, that's fine because every show should have some ebb and flow to it.
With these Ring of Honor appearances, at this point, were you being told, hey, this is all this is? This is just a one off because you're here? Or was there anything, hey, we might take a look at you in the future? And did that ever come in the future where yourself and Johnny Goodtime, you guys really started blowing up with Pro Wrestling Guerrilla? Were you on Ring of Honor's radar? And were there any plans for that at all, or any discussions or hopes on your end?
I mean, there was always hopes because we did get told, both times. I got told both times, like, it's nothing. Just taking a look. If you get, obviously lightning in a bottle, you get over. That's one thing, but they're just like, it's just a chance to get looked at, make some connections. Okay, especially the first one. I was in Philly. It worked out. I had my gear. It was one of those. But on the Saturday show in Arizona, Kerry Silken, Ring of Honor owner who I've met a few times. Super nice, a wonderful guy. One of my closest friends, Mike Mongoose, who I worked with, raised the bar, and at Hollywood, he's super close with Kerry. Um, Kerry, I guess he really liked me and Kevin. He's like, hey, that's a good little team. But he wasn't the booker. The booker has plans.
Mm-hmm.
There's things, but to hear that, I was like, okay, hey, at least there's a chance. And then anytime. Uh, After that, anytime ROH was like on the West, we would certainly try to get booked, especially whenever they were in Vegas, God bless them, the Young Bucks tried to get us on ROH, I think 3 years in a row in Vegas, and it just never worked out. But it's not like it was to the point where we weren't getting communication, Delirious, he and I would, have a little back and forth, and see if something could work, if there was a place that fit for us anywhere on those, Vegas cards, and it just, it never worked out. But we got to see some of our other friends, take advantage of those local opportunities. Reno Scum got to, did a couple things on ROH in Vegas, and I was happy to see that. It's like, hey, at least it went to, some of the good ones.
Very cool. Yeah, and I look back, early Young Bucks, Super Smash Brothers, those kind of teams. I in my head, I'm like Rock Nestle would have fit in perfectly with that because that's the stuff you were doing in PWG. So
Yeah, no, that was definitely where our mind was. We're like, why aren't we there? We know the right people, but it's just, there's a million reasons we weren't there, and there's a million reasons we should have.
yeah, absolutely.
It is what it is, and it was weird because Ring of Honor was a company that was like one of the first indies I really understood as being like an independent company. One of the first indie DVDs I bought had Low Key and Amazing Red doing all their crazy, and I was like, oh, whoa, this is way
Incredible.
different. I was just like, okay, and so it kind of always felt like not the place for me. Um, I was just like, I know I am technically good enough to be here. I am confident in that. I'm still confident in that. The current Ring of Honor today, I could go with anybody in there. I'm confident in that. Um, but I felt like it could be a place for me and Kevin because ROH always had awesome tag teams with very, very, very different dynamics. And I was like, me on my own, I don't know if ROH is the place for me because I want to be a little more entertaining in a different way. But me and Kevin, man, we worked our asses off, and
Yeah.
that was a place where I knew we could do it and shine well. Like, I mean, man, I would have loved to been able to wrestle the Briscoes. That was always a match I was afraid of it for a long time, and then part of me was like, no, don't be afraid of it. Like like how much could you take away from working the Briscoes? And we'd already had good matches with the Young Bucks. Sky was back there, and we both Kevin and I have amazing chemistry with him when he was there. So it's like there's a lot of times where I was just like, man, we should be there. I really think we should be there, and it never worked out. It sucks. But again, and at least it wasn't like a major goal for me as an individual. I just think it would have been a really smart place for me and Kevin to be together.
No, that makes sense. And speaking of him, we talked a lot about you guys getting together, and we'll definitely dive more into that with PWG and everything else. But I'm curious, we spent a lot of time talking about the pandemic in the last one and how that was a rough time for you guys because right before the pandemic, you guys were on your way. You guys were really firing on all cylinders because you guys had been around for almost 10 years at that point, I think, right before the pandemic, maybe a little.
No, yeah, that was our 10th anniversary. Bro, I have the most beautiful 10th anniversary tour shirts. We were supposed to have all these new debuts. I was gonna take these cool tour shirts. They're awesome, man. It's got really cool pictures of us, and it has like all the sick teams we've ever beat, like X'd out. It says Young Bucks, Smash Bros, like all this stuff.
That's
It's a great
awesome.
shirt. We had all these shows lined up to bring them to, and they all went away. So it was like right when our 10th anniversary was popping. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was where I was going with it, where you guys were really starting to take off again, and then the pandemic hit. You talked extensively about 2020 was a really tough year, which it was for a lot of people, yourself especially, specifically. Around, I think, 2021, you guys were getting back together and you were trying to get momentum going again. What ended up happening with that? Because I know you guys still have teamed off and on, but it doesn't feel like it's as consistent now. Is it because of your NWA responsibilities? Where is that going, and what do you see as the future for you two?
It's been tough because I mean, I feel like I am so confident in what me and Kevin can bring to any show. But because of that as well, it's just a realistic part of the business is you price yourself out of certain opportunities. What you're worth in your mind, and some places just cannot afford it, or it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work with that, no matter how bad they wish they could have you and how bad you want to go have fun at that show and work with certain people. Sometimes it just doesn't work. And that's a big part of why we don't do a lot. We know what we're worth, and if we can't get it, we won't do it. And it's a bummer, but last year in 2022, we teamed we teamed in Southern California 4 times. That's it.
It's
We
crazy.
did we did 2 weed shows, which I love. And then we did a beer festival, and then we debuted for GCW in a tag team title match.
It's very cool, by the way.
Thank you. And I think it's cool too. And I think like that's kind of where sometimes I get confused and frustrated because I do reach out. I reach out to promotions, and I make sure we're visible on the internet. Uh, and it's just weird because it's like, man, to go from only working like fun, like festival style shows with promoters that we like, that put us with people we like to work with, that's fun. That's when wrestling is really fun. And to do just those kind of shows, but still have the trust and I guess like the cemented confidence in us as a team to debut in such a high profile match.
Yeah,
We had never touched GCW at all, and our first match is sold in front of a sold out crowd at the Ukrainian Center against Los Mesquizos. Like, what a cool way to debut, and the respect that the GCW locker room gave us. Like, I mean, it's kind of weird to think about, but I'm like 15 years older than a lot of these guys.
yeah.
And they did watch us in PWG and they were happy for us to be there. Like the respect that Miedo and Ciclope gave us was like, I don't know, man. It was just like a warm feeling that I'd never really gotten to feel before. And I know I've felt the way they were making me feel. Like I know I've like been around wrestlers I like that, where I'm like, man, like I loved watching them. It's really cool to be with them or even wrestling them. And the way a lot of like I don't know, it's the GCW locker room really tickled me that night. It made me really feel good about the hard work we had put in for over a decade. To have so many young guys be like, wow, cool to meet you, like holy crap, just all that. It's silly, but I mean, for me, it goes a long way. That's some money in the bank in a different way, and it felt good, and it felt good, and it felt really good to show people like, yo, we could still go. Watch us show up and turn up at GCW, and I thought we kicked ass. I'm hoping we'll be back, and I think we will be. It's got to work out, you know.
schedule wise? Because again, you're so busy with, first of all, real life. That
Yeah.
that's a thing in and of itself. And then obviously your duties with the National Wrestling Alliance, which I would assume is, priority first and foremost as far as pro wrestling goes.
Yeah, yeah, now when it comes to everything, the NWA has been my main gig since May of I guess 21. Or no, June of 21 is when I first showed up there on the I think as Shadow our Shadows Fall pay-per-view was the first weekend I was with them. It was one of the Georgia TVs. So, I mean, yeah, that's been my main gig for 2 years now, and you gotta, that affects the schedule a lot. Being the father of a son that's getting older, doing more things. My son's in theater now. He's in school. So there's a lot more going on, and it's harder to say yes to a booking, especially because a lot of them come on short notice. That's just the way wrestling industry's always been, you know. And when you're hungry for that gig, you say yes right away. But I can't really do that all the time now, and that definitely limits what Kevin and I can do together. Um, but even him, he's super busy. He's always been busy with his fitness and his nutrition business. And he's a big avid mountain climber, like rock climber. Like, he's a busy guy. Um, and so sometimes it's just tough.
Yeah.
It's just tough. And even when the money's there and the opportunity's awesome, it's been hard to make a lot of stuff work. And I'm hoping we can get back on track. But I mean, and you know what? It's part of it too, is I certainly don't mind watching my best friend thrive. For him to be, a focal point, in United Wrestling is cool to see. He's always deserved it. When I was a booker, I made sure he was too, because I believe, not just because he's my friend, but because it's just, man, he's one of a kind wrestler.
Mhm.
He is just such a special talent, and so I hope we get to team a lot more this year. Fingers crossed. But if not, I know that he's still, having the best match of the night at Hollywood every time. I'm confident. I don't even have to go and watch. I just know he is.
That's great. That's great. And selfishly, I do hope to see you guys team up more because I think you guys are awesome together.
I never have more fun than when me and him are beating the crap out of people.
Fantastic. Okay, let's get back to PWG. I sent
Yeah,
you on like 12 detours. I apologize for
it's
that.
fun.
But right after the Brian Cage Taylor at the time match, you had a match with the Cutlers, and that I
hmm
believe was your first time teaming up as the Rock Ness in PWG. At this point, was it communicated to you like, okay, this is going to be a regular spot for you, or was it still kind of, we'll see how it is, we'll see how you guys do together here?
It was definitely, yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
It was hey, you did good on your own, but we're gonna put we'll put you guys together and then we'll see. Like either way, I feel like Kevin would have been fine. He had, he's one of a kind talent, impressed the hell out of them every time. The crowd loved watching him kill himself for them. So I think he would have been fine either way, but it was like, and certainly nothing was guaranteed at PWG. There was no firm spot. You would even see, even some of the biggest names that were over there, would stop being there for whatever reason it may be. So, but I was confident. I was like, dude, I know. I was like, I am more confident in us than I am in me. So I know we're gonna tear it up here. And that first match with the Cutlers could not have gone better. Like it could not have gone better. And I think that was the first time we actually wrestled them. We ended up wrestling them a ton in Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, which was even more fun. But I mean, we were just everything clicked that night with the Cutlers. Like everything went awesome. We debuted a lot of new stuff nobody had ever seen before. A lot of unique stuff that makes Rock Nest special. We were able to really just show off that night. Um, and I think that was definitely when people were like, "Oh, okay, okay, this is gonna work."
And
You
the
know, the
Cutlers, they're kind of like the Bravados, where I think there's a lot of people who don't even realize they were twin brothers, or not twin brothers, a pair of brothers, because one's gone on to more success. And
yeah,
I think at this point, people kind of forget that they were, a pretty well established duo for a while.
Oh, dude, they had one of the most memorable like hardcore matches, I think it was, at PWG with the Young Bucks,
Yeah.
Obviously they had wrestled each other more times than they could count, and they brought every bit of their A game and against each other. And so I mean, the Cutler Brothers were an amazing team, and we went on to have some really good ones with them at Hollywood. A street fight where we actually fought in the street on Hollywood Boulevard. I mean, it was crazy. They were a great team. I wish they would have teamed more, but Dustin went on to he owns a bunch of gyms, Brandon, we see him spraying that cold spray. So, but I mean, it clicked, man, and thank God it did because me and Kevin tried some pretty wacky stuff that night that worked really, really in our favor as just being different. Like, oh, these guys are different. They're
Do you
they're
have an
weird.
example of anything in particular?
I mean, we did the Yoshi clotheslines where I ride on Kevin's back and
Yeah.
clothesline them while he's running full steam. We did Kevin puts me in a torture rack. We were always known for our move from the fireman's carry position, the weapons grade bolognium where he kicks him with my leg and then DVDs me like a weapon onto him.
Mhm.
But we had a variant that we did with them where he would hold me in a like a torture rack and then run at both of them. And as he speared them both same time, I crossbodied them both same time. So we were
Very
out there just
cool.
busting out wacky stuff, and they're like, okay, these guys are cool. And it really, it just, I think Super Dragon really liked that because the very next match we went over on the Young Bucks, the Cutlers, and the Taylor Boys to qualify for DDT.
Do you get a lot of feedback at PWG? Because, for example, and I don't know this to be true, but there's long time been speculation with Chikara that Mike Quackenbush would send these long, detailed reports after a show, critiquing everybody's work, and obviously a lot of places you just get a good match. Where did PWG fall?
Um, Closer to the good match. Like that was usually what it was. You'd go up, drag me, hey man, did you watch it? And he would just be like, no, I'll see it later when I'm editing. And you'd be like, oh, okay, okay, for sure. He's like, but you guys were on time, so that's good. Like, and it again, like Super Dragon's just he's just a different dude. And then later he would text you in the middle of the night, like, yo, that was killer. Like, great job. It was never extensive, never big nitpicks. If he had something to say, if something pissed him off, he would tell you right away if he happened to be out there and like saw it. Because he was always doing other stuff during the shows. A lot of times he would only see the second half and then he would watch the rest when he got home and started editing because he'd be on that edit right away. Um, and so like, yeah, I mean, sometimes, yeah, I'd be still up, 3 in the morning eating Jack in the Box, and I'd get a random text like, "Oh, great shit tonight." Sweet, that's as good as it gets. And I would honestly, I mean, I prefer a middle ground. Don't tell me I'm good. Tell me what was good and tell me what could be better.
Yeah.
But don't ever write me a novel. Like if Quack sent me a novel with like all the nitpicks, I would delete it. I don't know. That needs to be a conversation,
No,
not a memo.
I hear you. With Super Dragon, just could we talk about him in general? Because he's a guy who, before, well, I guess PWG was going, but before people really knew him as just like the owner, the guy behind PWG, he had a reputation for just some great wrestling. Him and Excalibur were a great tag team. When did you first meet him at PWG, or did you see him at all on the independent scene beforehand in the couple of years before?
No, and this bothered a lot of people for whatever reason, but I had never even watched a PWG show before I wrestled there. And it wasn't like for any reason. I just hadn't. I had
Mhm.
access. I had DVDs sitting around. I think I may have seen clips of Pac and Generico from one, from my comp my brother-in-law gave me. But like I'd never seen a PWG show. I obviously knew who all the wrestlers were from other places. But some of them I had never seen really, wrestle. And then once I wrestled there once, I was like, all right, bro, like do your homework. I forget, I'd seen Dragon everywhere but PWG. I don't think I'd ever seen a PWG match. It was all like old AWS and Rev Pro. But then I finally started, watching older PWG shows, mostly just to see my friends like in there, young and fun. It was kind of
Mhm.
fun to watch, some of my mentors and stuff when they were young and skinny doing dumb crap.
So with Super Dragon, you weren't super familiar with him before you went to work there?
I mean, I'd seen his matches and stuff, but most of it was actually East Coast stuff I had seen. Like when he was over in CZW, and so I mean, yeah, I mean, I knew what he was. Honestly, he was not someone I was interested in wrestling. I knew I would just be a victim of, a violence party, a curb stomp, gnarly psycho driver, and at the time, I was just like, I don't know, like that I'm not hungry for that. I've never been hungry to go out there and like, oh yeah, get killed. Like, no, no, I don't want to. I don't want that. I know it's gonna already hurt. So, getting whooped by Super Dragon didn't really interest me. But then once I was there for a couple years, actually a match came up. We were supposed to wrestle in a four-way tag with Super Dragon and Steen teaming, and I was just like, and everyone was like, you know, they're gonna fucking kill you, and I was just like, I'm ready. You know, it
Hey,
took a
there you
couple
go.
years, but it got to that point when, you know, once it was on paper, I mean, it was announced, man, we were going to be the main event of a show. Rock Ness versus Young Bucks for Super Smash Brothers versus, I think, Appetite for Destruction was
Sounds
their
right.
name. Yeah, and I was just like, I mean, and like everyone was like, for weeks, you know, just ribbing me at every show. They're like, "Oh, bro, we're gonna miss you. Oh, he's gonna kill you." And I was just like, "Can you guys stop?
Oh, so
Like,
what?
this
The match didn't
sucks,
end up
dude."
happening though.
No, Super Dragon, he was, you know, training, getting ready because he hadn't wrestled in a while, and he injured his knee pretty bad, and he was
Ah,
back down on the shelf for, I want to say, I don't know, it was months. He was down for a while, and that just threw it off, and then it turned the match from a main event four-way into like a second match three-way, and I remember not really liking that match or feeling like it I feel like that four-way, like, oh crap, like Rockness is a main event team in PWG. And then when it became a three-way and like it was second on the card because I think, you know, I think the Smash Brothers maybe had to leave, you know, like just logistics crap
yeah.
got in the way. And then that match, I feel like belittled Rockness a lot. We came out looking real small in that match. And then everything from there on was kind of downhill. We had like a fucking as good of a first year as you could possibly get in any company. And then after Super Dragon got injured and things kind of went, I feel like that was like the catalyst for everything going the wrong way for us. No matter how hard we were working out there, that was kind of like after that, I feel like we lost a lot of our, that was the beginning of it because really what turned the fans against us was when we beat Shima and Ricochet at Wrestle Reunion the next year.
We'll definitely be diving into that
Yeah.
shortly. To put a button on the Super Dragon talk, you said he was very short with you at the beginning. Did that ever change? Did you ever have a better relationship with him as time went on? Not that it was a bad relationship, but like, did you ever have like a closer relationship as time went on, or was it always pretty basic and professional in that sense?
It was pretty, I mean, I don't know, cold feels like a negative term, but I
Yeah.
mean, he's just blunt. He's just blunt and quiet, but man, if you click with something on him, he's a totally different dude. I was just blabbing about a PlayStation 1 game that I love, and all of a sudden he was just like right next to me and he was like, "No way. You like that game too?" And I was like, "Oh shit, we were talking about it was Vigilante 8. It's like a Twisted Metal like game
Okay.
uh for PlayStation." And he was just like, "Oh, I I didn't know you like games. Like, what else do you?" And then we just started talking about video games. And then I remember Peter came over, and then all of a sudden we're having this full blown, like super nerdy conversation with Super Dragon about video games. A guy that had never said more than good match or you took too long, you know? Like all of a sudden he's just like he's one of the boys like really chatting with us. And it was fun. So I mean it's really fun to talk to him about you know, older video games. That was one of the things we always would talk about and music stuff too. Like I remember we talked about, I think it was the White Stripes. We talked about them like forever one time. So I mean, you know, Super Dragon's a cool dude. It's just, I mean, he's all business.
Hmm.
He's all biz.
And I guess it makes sense when you're in a promotion that size and you're the guy basically running 90% of it. It's going to happen. Plus, just different personalities.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most elite pro wrestling companies in the eyes of fans, pretty much, you know, ever in terms of work rate and a lot of things. You know, it's just such an elite and exclusive company in so many ways, and it's all in his hand. You know, that's got to be stress. And he was all business in the ring too. He just
Yeah.
must have been all business his whole life. You know, that's just the way the dude is. But he loves him some Guns N' Roses and some PlayStation games.
Appetite of Destruction makes a lot more sense now when you throw in
Yeah,
that little tidbit in.
that was definitely why they were called that.
In regards to PWG, and you know, we strive on this channel to be positive. So when I bring up this negative, it's not trying to bait negativity out of you or anything like that.
Of course.
But there's a criticism that, especially amongst wrestlers, or at least there was at one point when PWG started. You even mentioned it. It was bringing these big names, wrestle the SoCal guys, give the SoCal guys these big opportunities. Over time, PWG kind of started phasing out a lot of the SoCal people in favor of, I would say at some points, 90%, 95% of the card was people not even from the area.
Yeah,
What
I
do
mean,
you think of that? Because that's a criticism that a lot of local wrestlers have, because of course, they want the opportunities. What do you think of that criticism? Is it fair? Is it right? Why do you think it happened?
it's totally valid. I was absolutely in that camp. I was like, why the hell is this Battle of Los Angeles feature not a soul from Los Angeles? It always bothered me. It definitely bothered me to watch SoCal guys get phased out, and like it just didn't make sense to me, especially when the root of the company was what it was. But again, business is business, and if this concept is making you money and DVD sales hand over fist, sold out shows every single time because it's the absolute, cream of the crop super indie. I mean, all I can do is be butthurt I didn't have that idea,
Yeah,
it's very frustrating to watch so much of what made that company, it's just that was the spark. That was the fuel for the flame, was putting guys who are getting overlooked against the best in other parts of the world so they can show they're just as good. And then it just kind of became like a showcase of all stars, which if that's your cup of tea, that's your cup of tea. But for me personally, I would much rather see a good mixed card, with 30% of, and I don't say locals like it's, I don't know, it's always such a weird insult. Like it's like, yo, we didn't choose for this company to be located here, and it certainly didn't make it easier to get there.
yeah,
Because a lot of the guys that have been in PWG, I will never, try to insult anybody with this because it's not an insult, but most of those people like paid their own way to get there from no matter where they came from in the country. They flew themselves for the opportunity to work for somewhere good, the same way you would invest in yourself to go to a better college to get better at something, any subject. There's nothing wrong with it, but that always bothered me where people are like, oh, they're only on because they're local, because they can drive. And I'm just like, this guy's on because he's flying himself. He
yeah.
drove too. Like, what the hell do you mean? So, it was very frustrating to watch the locals get pushed away because there's plenty of deserving guys. There was always guys that, man, they should be there. They should be there. And towards the very end of Reseda, you saw a little bit of it. You saw Bateman. Bateman finally there. He should have been there for a minute.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, Brody King, was there towards the end of Reseda and cemented his spot there. But we saw Andy Brown dip a toe. Andy Brown's one of the best wrestlers I know, and he's killing it on the East Coast, and people are taking notice. He belonged in PWG. He definitely did. So it's just frustrating to see it go away for so long, and then it kind of came back. And then once they got to the Globe, it seemed even less. There was like one little crop of, LA guys. The crowd hated them, for the most part, and they didn't come back. And then that was kind of it. I think the most recent local team would be the West Coast Wrecking Crew, that debuted there, but they're not local by any means. They're from here. They cut a lot of their teeth here, but I mean, Royce Isaacs is from Colorado, Jarrell Nutt's from the Pacific Northwest, and they've done a lot more. But yeah, so I mean, that was probably the most recent example of local guys getting on, and they deserved it, and I hope to see more.
Yeah.
The Wolf Zaddies would kill it in PWG, kill it.
It's interesting to me how they went from local versus, and again, I don't want to use local as a derogatory term by any stretch. It's just people nearby against stars was kind of the theme, and then it morphed into more of just a pure super indie, and I find the transition to be really
I
interesting.
mean, what do they say? You live long enough to see yourself become the villain. It is what it is. It's just the nature of the company to survive. It needs to make changes and to thrive. This is what works.
And you made a good point too, because like when they were a DVD business, they probably still sell DVDs. I don't know their model
They
these
do,
days,
dude. They still do. They
but
do the big high
they
spots
sold
annual
ridiculous.
sale. Oh, dude, insane, insane. And they take forever, and people still buy them.
Yeah,
That
that
just
I
shows you
remember
that
that. Yeah.
power, that power of PWG. People will wait. A show will happen in March, and they'll get it next June, and they're
Yeah,
like, "Oh man, that show was incredible."
it's crazy. Somebody or two people you keep bringing up, and obviously they're huge in PWG, and they went on to be huge basically everywhere. The Young Bucks. When and I feel like you probably have enough stories to talk about the Young Bucks for 2 hours in of it itself. When did you first meet them? Was it in PWG? Was it before PWG? What were your early thoughts on them when they were, because they were crazy athletes. I mean, they still are, but like, oh, the stuff they were doing right from the jump was insane.
I mean, they're just just gifted, just talented, natural, and they trained hard from youth. They kind of like put, I don't know, it's like those people that do martial arts their whole life, they're gonna be great at it, and they were, man. They had that ring in their yard. When I had seen, I think it's some of their like an AWS match or something. I was like, wow, those guys are awesome. And then I was, my home promotion, like everybody hated the Young Bucks, dude. Everybody hated them. Every Fed hated them.
Was this
Uh,
not SoCal Pro? Which New Wave?
New Wave, SoCal Pro, it didn't matter where you went, man. Orange County, like everyone was hated the Young Bucks and they were jealous of them, Like promoters would bitch about how much they ask, their asking rate, and they're like, oh, like we can't, like who do these guys think there are? And I'm like, well, look who they are, they were right. They're just an example of guys that they were right. And I mean, they probably rubbed a lot of people the wrong way when they were younger. I certainly did. I remember my first impression of them was, thinking they were going to be really big jerks. That's all I had heard about them. And then I got put in a match. It was me versus Watts versus just Nick Jackson. And Nick was the coolest dude. And he pushed me to limits I hadn't gone to yet. Me and Watts really stepped our game up to hang with Nick, who was definitely, someone we needed to go into overdrive to hang with, even it was a simple match where he had basically, he was probably going half speed just to, help us get by. But man, like that alone, that immediately changed my mind. I don't know why, everyone thinks these guys are jerks just because they think they're worth a certain amount of money that makes them an asshole. Maybe you don't like the way they said it to them, but I was like, maybe you didn't respond well. Like, you never really know.
Yeah.
But I'm like, these guys, I just realized I was like, okay, they're just confident dudes that back it up. And that's always going to bother people. Confidence, people hate confidence. They do. Uh, you know, but I mean, once I'd worked with Nick, I was just like, oh wow, awesome. These guys are awesome. Like that was it. It just immediately I was like, never mind. These guys are super cool. And then every time we worked with them ever after that, they were nothing but good. Even once we were out of PWG, they were still actively trying to get us back. They were the only ones fighting for us. Was Matt. Matt would text me like, "Hey, I think there might be an opportunity. Are you available? If so, like it was I don't know. They're just good brothers in that sense. They really had our back because I don't know. They just saw a real tag team committed to it similar way and probably thought we'd and I don't know. I don't know if they maybe understood that I was a bit misunderstood as a talent because clearly a lot of people misunderstood them. I don't know if they could read that about me because I felt like I was really misunderstood a lot with my attitude and confidence. But either way, they were always nothing but good to me, and we would always be on random shows together and hang out. And when I did ROH that first time, Nick, I had already wrestled him at Battleground where I wrestled him and Watts. And when I showed up to ROH, like we were talking about earlier, I didn't know anybody there except for Adam, and he was obviously busy running the show. So after setup, I was just kind of in the locker room, and Joey Ryan was in the corner, but he wasn't like I wasn't really close with him yet. And then the Bucks were over there, and Colt Cabana, and I think I had talked to Eric Stevens. He was the only one that had really introduced himself. No one else had said anything to me. He was super nice. And then all of a sudden, I just hear Nick go, "Hey, Johnny Yuma, come over here." And I was like, "What's up?" He's like, "Bring your bags over here." And I was like, "Oh, okay." He's like, and then Matt was like, "Come on, man, SoCal's got to stick together. Get over here." And I was like, "Ooh, that stuck with me. It really did. It sounds corny, it sounds so lame, but him saying SoCal's got to stick together when I'm just this, baby with his foot in the door at one of the most prestigious, indies there is, like it went a long way with me. That really, really, really." To make me feel comfortable in such a scary environment. I'm in the ECW arena 2 years into the ring. I'm wearing a stupid zebra jumpsuit, not knowing if I'm going to get eaten up by one of the harshest crowds in wrestling. And these guys are like, "Hey, come over here. Come plug your phone in over here. Come put your bag over here." That just went so far with me as a person, not just as a wrestler, but just as a dude, feeling lost and, needing some kind of comfort. And they were there.
That's very cool. And obviously, we know what they've gone on to do. And to an extent, some of that is still about, you see a lot of SoCal guys and former PWG guys filter in through AEW. Peter Avalon, you brought him up earlier. He's a
Yep.
perfect
Oh
example.
yeah.
Cutler, another example of that.
Yep.
So,
Yep. They've always believed in Peter. They've always believed in Brandon.
if I'm correct, and you were talking about this, there were plans to potentially do some AEW stuff before the pandemic hit for yourself in good time, right?
I mean, there was nothing firm, but just the dates that had gotten floated to us. They were like, "Hey, keep these, people are like, hey, keep these in your calendar. They're gonna be here. This is who you're gonna want to reach out to. It was like, not a
Yeah.
sure thing, but as sure as a thing really gets in wrestling before until you're done. So, and I know for a fact they would have had our back. The Bucks definitely would have had our back in regards to any kind of situation there. I'm confident in that. They always believed in us. They thought, we deserved a lot more than we got, in terms of our fair shake in wrestling and SoCal and stuff. And, a lot of, behind the scenes BS getting in the way of certain stuff and them seeing past that and seeing how good we are. Uh, that always, I don't know, it's just nice to know that some of the best in the world believe in you. That's really cool.
Absolutely. And I know you're friends, so you might not look at it this way, but from an outsider's perspective, hopefully in the future, that could lead to future opportunities. Another name you brought up, Colt Cabana. The reason I'm bringing him up right now is because, like the Young Bucks, and he was kind of the blueprint, and the Young Bucks followed it very successfully, he kind of changed the way indie wrestling worked. Before Colt Cabana, indie wrestling was good. He really knew how to capitalize on it from a merch perspective, the podcast perspective, everything like that. He kind of changed what being an independent contractor in wrestling was, and the Young Bucks would later follow that suit. What were your interactions like with Colt Cabana throughout the years and overall experiences working with him?
I mean, he was always on like, Marquez stuff. He would always pop in and I would, kind of pick his brain and, I don't know, a lot of big brother vibes from Colt where it's like, he'll pick on you, he'll razz you.
Yeah.
But he'll also help you. And so, I remember being really, really inspired by his shirt game and specifically him having his own entrance music. I thought
Yeah.
his entrance theme was so cool, and so I went and wrote my own, and I wouldn't have had I not, saw what he did. He threw it on iTunes or whatever, and I was like, I would hear it on his podcast. I was like, I got to get my own theme song. So I went to the studio and wrote and recorded my own theme song, and that's because of Colt and because of that DIY kind of attitude. And I've always, rocking this, we used to kill it on merch, man. We would kill it at PWG. It didn't matter where we went. We would always kill it on merch. And a lot of that was from me being 2 tables away from Colt. What's Colt doing? Can I see what he's doing? What's he charging? How's he approaching this, And we would never outsell him or even come close, but took a lot of tips from him. So, and I've wrestled him a few times. We had a really good match with him and Peter Avalon at Hollywood. It was Rock Nest versus them. Super fun. Got in all the tried and true butt spots that we both do, so that was fun. But he's just, again, he's big time vet, knows a little bit of everything. You can probably ask him anything and he'll have some kind of advice for you on it. So but definitely took a lot from his approach towards merchandising stuff. I was like, oh man. And like I'm a mark for merch. Like I'm Mr. Oh, there's a movie out. Oh, is there a Taco Bell tie-in? Oh, are there shirts? Is there a toy line? Like that's me anytime anything I dig comes out. So it's weird that I didn't think to do that until I saw him succeeding so much with it.
On that subject, just real quick, are you a collector or are you like a trader? Like you'll say, "Oh, I like this one, I'll have it," and then, "Oh, I could trade it or sell it off for something different." Or are you
Oh,
someone who just like collects as much as you
no.
can?
Oh, I'm a collector, man. I have toys that are from like 1988. I have my very first six Ninja Turtles toys I got. I have all my original everything. I don't get rid of my stuff. I take care of it. I love it. I'm a big time collector. I have thousands of Star Wars toys. I've probably got, 600 wrestling figures. Those are in tubs. I kind of stopped displaying those. Those are always even more played with than others because my Star Wars, I would always play with them hard, out in the dirt, out in the mud, out in the rain, and then I would like clean them back up and put them on the shelf. With my wrestling toys, just always got left around. They were always meant for more rough play. So those are all in tubs and stuff. But no, I'm a big time collector, big time collector. So I love, merch. Like for me, I have every shirt I've ever sold. I have one of,
Hmm.
folded up in a special drawer. All the gear I've ever worn is folded up and like organized in some drawers.
With your collecting, did you? I don't really know how to put this properly. When you get into an industry or a business or a hobby yourself, you can kind of become a little jaded towards it, perhaps, where you don't have that same fandom you once did. Do you find yourself not really going after wrestling collectibles as much because you're a part of wrestling and maybe it didn't interest you as much now, and you focus primarily on the Star Wars, the Marvel, the Indiana Jones, the this and that?
Yeah, that actually definitely happened, and it's weird because everyone always kind of would give me shit like, "Man, Yuma's never gonna stop liking wrestling," and then other people would be like, "It happens to all of us," and it changes. You don't stop loving it. You just look at it a little differently, especially as long as I've been doing it with the type of career I've had. Obviously, I feel some sort of way towards pro wrestling, and I really, really am only attached to like my glory days. Like I can find good quality matches from, every year of TV wrestling ever. But there's just certain years of certain stuff I'll always go back to that I really appreciate as much as I did then, if not more. But I did really pull back on collecting wrestling stuff. A lot of it was money related, and then mainly is when I realized was the size. I was like, man, I'm like, I don't. These are big ass toys. They're all 6 inches.
Yeah,
Like
that's true.
my Star Wars ones are smaller. I can have way more of these. I can have way more fun play sets, ships. I was like, you can only have one big ring and figures. So I pulled back. The last wrestling figure I bought when I stopped buying was Mike Knox, who is one of my absolute favorite people at the NWA. I was
Another
always a
guy I
huge.
want to interview.
Oh,
I'd
bro,
love to
you got
talk
to
to
get
him.
him. That man's a legend. Mike Knox is an absolute legend. He's a saint. I was a big fan of him from the Urban Outlaws and UPW. And so when he showed up in ECW on Sci-Fi, I was like, oh, sweet, this guy's getting his due. And then he got even crazier looking. And they made a toy of him with his big beard and long hair, which was my favorite look.
I
So
love
that was
bearded Mike
actually
Knox.
yes, dude. That was the last wrestling figure I bought until the Viscera figure came out from Mattel like 2 years ago.
Did you did you find, because at a certain point there was probably a lot of judgment for figure collectors and stuff like that. It's become a lot more socially acceptable. First of all, you have Star Wars is like, in Marvel Cinematic Universe, are the biggest things in pop culture. Even in
Yeah.
wrestling, you have like Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins kind of made it cool again to get figures and discuss figures. Was there a point where you kind of saw that change over, and did you used to kind of have to hide that, or did you not care? Did you feel judgment at all at any point?
I've just never cared for I've always kind of, you know, was the move to the beat of my own drum. Like if something wasn't popular anymore, I didn't care. I was like, I don't care. My friends, were like, "Oh, you're still playing with toys, bro? Like, come out and play football." And I was like, I don't care. This is what is making me happy. I'm doing this. So I've never been shy about my action figure collecting at all. I remember, when I first started bringing girls over, they'd be like, "What the hell is this?" And I'd be like, "Take it or leave it, honey. This is who I am." I was like, yeah, 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 yeah. No, no, no. If you want to go sit on the edge of the bed, you're gonna have to step past the 1996 ring. Right now, I've got Goldust versus Vader in there, so I'll move that later. You know what I mean? Like that was like, this is who I am. Like I'm wearing a Star Wars shirt. I'm ditching school to buy Star Wars toys. I'm spending my whole paycheck on freaking WWE figures at Toys R Us. I'm skipping a date so I can, be at the midnight release of some crappy video game. You know what I mean? That's who I am. And that's who I still am.
Hey,
I've
it's good to be yourself, though.
yeah, I'm glad. I wish more people could love who they are and realize that we're all a little bit weird and there's nothing, as long as you're not hurting anybody, who cares? Just be yourself. That's why I like toy collecting so much. It's a pretty damn harmless hobby. There's really very few people that can get hurt as long as with anything that costs money, as long as you're responsible. You could go into the poorhouse buying toys. I've seen it.
Yeah.
It's sad, but I'm not like that. So I'm just happy that I have a hobby I love, that's fun, that hurts nobody, and I can share with tons of people.
And I think there's just an inherent nature of people, a lot of people to judge. Like I said, I told you this in the last interview. I'm a huge fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm obsessed
Hell
with
yeah.
it. I love every movie. I love every show. Even ones that people don't love as much, I'm like, no, I love it, and this is why.
I'm with
But
that's me with Star Wars. I feel so you are with that the way I am with Star Wars. It's like, bro, I don't know why you're complaining. In fact, since the last time we talked, I went and saw Quantumania and I
yeah,
loved it. I was
yeah,
like,
I
what is
loved it.
everyone crying about?
But the thing is, before I got into it, I was always kind of judgmental. Like again, I knew like the main heroes, but I was like, who wants to watch Iron Man? Like, who cares about that? Who Thor? Like, I remember my friend specifically. He was like, okay, these are the movies you need to watch. I think they were like 5 in by that point, and this is the order you need to watch them in. I was like, can I skip Thor? I don't really have any interest in watching Thor. Of course, as soon as I watched, I was like, this is awesome. But it's just my mind wasn't open to it. I just wasn't open minded.
No, I get that. That's how I was with wrestling. Remember, I was a big old hater, and then
Yeah,
I saw it, and I was like, "Oh, I was wrong." So, and I don't know. Sometimes being wrong is the coolest thing that can happen to you.
absolutely. There's so much PWG to still dive into and championship wrestling. Let's be honest, there's no way we're gonna
We're gonna
cover
need
it.
a part 3.
And I hope that you'll be gracious
I'm
enough to offer
down.
me a time in the future.
Of
I want
course.
to. I really want to talk about TNA, and I figure
Yeah.
maybe we can wrap up, the last however long, because you did a couple of appearances with TNA. How did the opportunity first come about? Because I know last time we briefly touched on it, and you said that afterwards you didn't get the opportunities that people would expect from it. Let's dial back even a little further. How did the opportunity come about? Who reached out? What happened?
So, we were in 2011. Me and Kevin were teaming regularly in Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, and then SummerSlam came to LA. And at the time, the head writer of Hollywood was Dave Lagana, who would eventually go on to run TNA. I think he worked with ROH, then TNA. He was in WWE before that. He had done everything as like a writer, producer, head booker, creative. He was in charge of Hollywood at the time, and a bunch of guys got booked on SummerSlam. Nice payday, little tryout match, whatever. And a bunch of the guys from Hollywood, they took it over the TVs that, we had already known about. But again, I don't know why the hell we were running TVs against SummerSlam in the same city. But that's a whole different headache. Um, and so a bunch of the guys got cut, including Good Time. They're like, "Oh, you're
Like
done." And
let go completely?
yeah, they were just like, "Oh, you guys, you're done." Like Joey was the booker at the time, and he got cut. Kevin got cut. Like 3 or 4 people. They're like, "Oh, like, oh, well, don't come back." And they're like, how could you do that? And I was like, "Okay, whatever." Uh, I was like, "Okay, that sucks." I would have done the same exact thing had they called me. So, but they didn't call me. And which is funny because I kind of got rewarded for not going. And I was like, I didn't get freaking asked. I would have gone, but obviously I didn't say that.
Yeah.
And then Lagana kind of rewarded me, gave me a little singles push, and he was really digging my work. I was feuding singles with Percy Pringle and LA Knight, Sean Ricker, Eli Drake, whatever you know him as. So I was having like a singles feud with him. I was wrestling Sean Spears. I wrestled Adam Pierce. I was going up in these like big 6-mans, like just singles, like just Lagana was really giving me like a lot of steam. And then he had moved on back to TNA, or yeah, he had moved on to TNA, and then I was just kind of, just me and Kevin just rising the ranks, PWG, Hollywood, or whatever. And then he said, "Hey, they're doing a gut check in Bakersfield. That's the only California one. You should do it." And I was like, "It costs $250. You want me to pay that to try out?" And he was like, "They're actually looking for X Division guys. I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. Make the investment."
And for those who
And
don't
so
know, gut check, there was like an on-screen gut check, and then there was a
yeah. Yeah, there's a real
off-screen
one and
gut
a
check.
fake one.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
exactly.
off-screen one was a genuine paid tryout that I saw work for many. It was legit. I'm proof. It's not, it was a real tryout. You paid. I got a cool t-shirt too. That's framed up there. That's with the others. Um and so me, my boy Big Duke, and Good Time, we drove up to Bakersfield, freaking, I don't know, 5-6 hours, whatever it was. Um and we go and we do these little tryouts in front of D'Lo Brown. He was the only judge. Um, and there was a referee as well. And we do these little tryouts, and I tore it up. I was a standout of the day. D'Lo pulled me aside. We were all standing around the ring. He's like, "All right, I'm gonna go talk, blah blah, do this and that." He came back after like 10 minutes, looked at his notes because he was taking notes all day.
Well, was it
And
cool
then,
working with D'Lo? Because
oh,
I'm guessing D'Lo was the guy you
D'Lo's
loved.
I was such a huge fan of D'Lo, and he was one of those ones where I was like, "Oh my God!" And he's the coolest dude ever too. I love D'Lo. He's never been anything but good to me. Good Time actually met him in Ireland on a tour when he was younger in the
All right.
business. So like D'Lo already knew him when we got to the tryout. I was the one he didn't know. So we do the tryout, and he was just super impressed by me, and I was very, stoked and motivated and proud of that fact. He was like, "Yeah," he was like, "It was you," and then, Good Time, I would say, was maybe a little behind you because Good Time had a rough opponent for one of his matches. It did not go well, not his fault, but that's part of the game. Your opponent makes you or breaks you just the way you make or break them. Um, and so whatever, they were like, "Yeah, we'll be in touch." He was like, "I guarantee we will be in touch. Please look out for your emails." And I was like, "Oh, shit. Okay."
Yeah.
So I'm in Japan. and I don't have any kind of internet or anything. And we get to Osaka after we were in Tokyo for 3 days or something. And then we get to Osaka, and I finally can post on Facebook using the internet's Wi-Fi. I was like, safely in Osaka, 8 days here, this many shows. I'm looking forward to it. And then Lagana commented on that. Uh, oh, that's why you're not answering your phone. And I freaked out. I was like, oh shit. So we
Oh,
still were in the airport, like waiting for our bags. And I messaged him and I was like, hey, what's going on? He's like, Al Snow's been trying to call you. And I was like, what? Like, what do you mean? And he was just like, yeah, I'll let him know that the reason you're not answering is because you're on a tour of Japan. He's like, that'll go a long way. And I was like, okay, cool. And he's like, give him a call back as soon as you land. So when I land, I literally in the airport, I call Al Snow and he's like, hey, we want to use you as part of this X Division tournament. Are you interested? I was like, 1,000% yes.
yeah.
TNA was one of my dream goals. I love TNA. I used to, go to my girlfriend's house to watch them every Wednesday on her parents' cable, and I would pay them $10 flat, when I left the house, and I would tape it. Like
I
that was
love it.
diehard TNA fan, diehard TNA fan. So I was super in. And then and so we, it all got straightened out, and that's pretty much what it was. It was, investing in that gut check, which felt silly at the time. I didn't have any money. I was living in a shed. I was living in a tool shed, and spent the 250 I didn't have to try out, and it just worked out. I got really great experiences. I learned so much. I got even closer with Scorpio Sky on that tour, that we bonded so much over that pay-per-view uh that Sunday, that Destination X we did together. But yeah, what it was really, it was from Lagana seeing my Hollywood work. And also what worked in my favor was Joey Ryan was kind of in the process of like his like gut check storyline there, I believe. And one of the matches they used to like highlight him was he and I at Hollywood. It was a really good match we had had. And I think they had seen that, saw I could work TV, and they were like, okay, well, he did that gut check that D'Lo liked, so let's use it. So
Your first,
it was being on Hollywood and then actually just going to that tryout that I probably normally would have never gone to. That definitely is what got me on TNA.
July 5th, 2012, you wrestled on Impact Wrestling. That was your
That's
first
right.
match, and it was with Kenny King.
Yep.
What was that like? Because again, this is something that you had been a fan of. It was a huge breakout moment. By far, I guess the biggest opportunity of your career
Oh
at
yeah.
that point. Were you nervous? What was it like dealing with Kenny King? And who were you dealing with backstage, like producers and all that?
Well, so man, we don't have enough time for the horrible day I had leading up to it, but we'll start from getting geared up. So we all get geared up, everyone that they brought that day, and they're like, all right, we're going to put you with you, you with you, you with you in these dark matches. And these were truly dark. The only people watching were Christopher Daniels, and he was off to the side. He wasn't like one of the people that we were supposed to be working. He was just watching so he could like help us because he's a great brother like that. But it was like Simon Diamond, D'Lo Brown, Dixie Carter, some office people I did not recognize, and then one other person. So just fucking stress city.
Hmm.
Nobody there but them. And they put me with a Midwest guy, and I was supposed to be the face. He was supposed to be the heel. As soon as we got told who was working who, they're like, "You have 4 minutes. You're doing this. You're this guy. You're the heel. You're the face. You're the heel. You're the face." They went around whatever. Like, you have this long to put it together. When we call you, you better be ready to go. And that was it. It was just like, oh shit, you're on the spot. Let's go. I get with him, and he was like, "Hey, I don't know how to be a heel." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And he's like, "I don't know how to be a heel." He's like, "I always do flips and I do all like my, all my cool shit." He's like, "I don't know how to put heat." And I was like, "Oh my God." I was like, "Well, I couldn't find anybody to ask." So I was like, I mean, we'll switch it. We'll kind of go 50-50. I'll be more aggressive. So basically, we didn't follow instructions. Strike one,
Oof.
big strike. Um, and then we're just not clicking because I'm already in a different headspace knowing we're going against what we were told to do. So, I'm kind of heating them up and stuff and whatever, and we're keeping it. I'm still doing flashy stuff, so it's just a bad match. I'm aggressive, but being flashy because I'm supposed to be the face and stand out. So, and things don't start gelling well. So it starts getting a little rough out there, and like, we're not fighting or anything, but it's falling apart. And I'm being even more aggressive as a result. And whatever, we wrap it up. I got some really good stuff in. I get chewed out in the back. Not not then, but later, Al Snow had quite a conversation with me about that, and he wasn't mad. He was just it was very, stern. Like, hey man, like something like that happens again, like blah blah blah, like you would never be back. It's only because this and this that. I guess somebody must have heard something and understood what had happened, so I kind of survived. But they really liked some of the offense I did, and they wanted to see me versus Kenny, size difference. So I got paired up with Kenny, who I'd met at ROH that Saturday I did that show.
Oh, there you
I'd met
go.
him. Yeah, I'd met him then. And so we were chatting like, oh, good to see you again, whatever. I think I had seen him in Vegas a couple times too. Um, so it was awesome. He's like, "Oh, sweet, I got Yuma." Like, great. Like he was glad because he was an already long time wrestler at that point. He was in TNA like 8 years before that
Yeah.
on the Impact days on Fox Sports. So it's like, he was like, "Oh, thank God they gave me somebody good," and I was like, that made me feel really good. The agent for our match was Simon Diamond, Pat Kenny, who I now work with extremely closely at NWA, which was really cool. I think that might have been part of how, one of the things I got that got me to NWA was Pat, maybe remembering I did that little bit of business there with him. Our match with Kenny was right on time. I had a really bad botch in the match that Taz buried on
What
commentary, and
happened? I don't
uh,
remember it.
I just went for one of my signature moves that's kind of unique, and we just kind of got stuck to the mat, and nothing happened. We crumbled, and it just looked like shit. And Taz went, "Well, that sucked." And I was like,
Jeez.
"Oh." When I got back to the back, my phone was blown up. Everyone was just like, "Taz buried you, bro. You're done. You're done." And I was like, "Oh, great." But the match was awesome. My referee was Earl frickin' Hebner, which
That's
was a
cool.
dream. And then I'm on the cell, he's walking me to the back and he was like, "You should be proud, kid. I don't know if you've ever done TV before, but you were right on time, right on the money. Great face, great selling. Keep selling, kid. You did great." And I was just like, "Holy shit. Wow. Cool." Like that was super cool.
Yeah, in our
And
last interview,
Christopher
you talked
Daniels.
about the Triple H and Chris Jericho segment from Raw,
Oh
and
yeah.
Earl
Oh
Hebner
yeah.
played such a big part in that, and that was like one of your biggest like fan moments. So for you to do that with him so many years later, that's awesome.
Bro, him counting my shoulders to the mat was just so cool from being a mark, like I was like, that's amazing. And I got really good feedback from Chris Daniels. He made sure when he was watching kind of on the side during the darks, he pulled me aside about that, and he was like, "Hey, make sure." He's like, "This was really great. Do this, skip these, do that." He was like, "Make sure you do these tonight. Make sure, make sure." So I made sure to get a couple things in that night that worked great. Kenny was awesome. And it was just, I don't know, man, it was pretty cool. I remember I got back to my hotel room and I just ate an entire large pizza by myself, just pleased as punch and proud of myself because I don't know, it's just when so many people tell you you're not going to do something, you're like, "No, yes, I am." And then things get in the way of it. You're like, maybe they were right. And then you do something like that. It just feels awesome. It's like a high that you get in no other way. There's very few better feelings than that kind of milestone success. It felt good. And then to get to stay and do the pay-per-view as well. I got to be on Destination X, like the X Division. I was such an X Division nerd. Like that, it was
Yeah,
just
you were in
almost.
a four-way with Scorpio Sky, who was Mason Andrews at the time, Dakota Darso, yourself, and Rubix, who is Jigsaw, another guy I'd love to talk to in the
That's right,
future
my
because
boy
he's so good.
Jigsaw. Dude, Jigsaw, I mean, I brought him out for the second Raise the Bar wrestling show. We had to. He's someone I've always thought was so good, and the West Coast would love him. And he just never really came out here that much. He did one PWG, I think. But like he's just such a staple of the East Coast, and like he was just one of the best. And being in that match with him was awesome. He made me look like $1 million. I can never thank him enough for how good he made me look out there. And then me and Sky got to bring it home together hot the way we had on Hollywood TV, the exact same finish we had done in that match we talked about where I got knocked out. We did it on the pay-per-view because I ran it by D'Lo. As soon as he said Sky was up, I was like, "Please let me like lose. Let me be the one to go under to this." And D'Lo, we explained it to him and I think I may have even showed him a clip and he was like, "You have to do that." And we did it and it went off without a hitch.
Actually, there's a slight mix-up. The match with Scorpio that we talked about last time was the one during the pandemic where it was your first match back in a while.
Oh,
So
that's right. I thought we
the
were talking
knockout
about
one we have to go over a different
the
time, hopefully.
knockout one. I swore we talked about that. Oh, that's right.
We'll save it. Hopefully, if we do a third, which again I hope we do, we'll definitely have to go over the knockout story because I would love to hear about that in the
Oh
future.
yeah, I got to take that post down though because it's confusing. So I'm gonna delete my confusing post. Wrong
No
one.
worries. I saw
But
it and I
yeah,
wasn't completely sure. I was like, did he get knocked out in that match and didn't mention it? And I was like,
mm-mm.
we don't have to worry about it. But
No, no,
yeah,
no. But yeah, whoops.
but what a cool, situation. What a cool opportunity. Did you know, like, at the Impact taping, did they say, hey, we want you to come back on Sunday? Or did you
Well,
already know we want you for these two
yeah,
days?
they had
Or,
told me ahead of time. They were like, so basically, Sky was on the Thursday before me, and they're like, hey, if you're gonna commit to this, we need you to commit to the pay-per-view as well, because you'll be on there in some format. They weren't sure if they were gonna do like a scramble or whatever. So Sky got told, hey, we'll bring you, we'll send you home, and then we're gonna bring you back and send you home. And then me, they're like, hey, we're gonna bring you. You guys stay till Sunday. Good luck. And I was like, oh. Okay, so like I mean like they covered my flight and stuff, but yeah, I had no money at the time either, and I had to pay for like 3 days in a hotel. I had no way to get around, so I literally didn't leave the room not once. I had
wow.
a bunch of tuna and protein bars in my backpack that I survived on, plus the pizza. Like I just lived in that hotel room for 3 days till it was time for the pay-per-view. And I had no way to get to the pay-per-view if it wasn't for Frankie Kazarian. Sky got dropped off there from the airport, and then Frankie picked us up. Thank God, because I had no way to the pay-per-view.
It's very cool that he did that, though.
Oh yeah,
Did
yeah,
you?
yeah. Frankie's always been very good to me.
We're gonna wrap up in a minute because I
Yeah.
know we got to get out of here. Just to put a button on the TNA. Did they follow up after those matches? Did they give any kind of feedback? Did they say, "Hey, we might call you," or was it just "Thank you for your work" and that it?
It was not even yeah, it was kind of a thank you for your work. I reached out to Al Snow and he went, hey, you did great business. We'll be in touch. And they were never in touch. I followed up all the time. Um,
Because when they were
I
doing those
only,
one night only, I would have thought like that you could have been one of the because they brought back a lot of those X Division guys for the one night only like two
yeah,
hour pay-per-views.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I tried, but I mean, there was yeah, I kept trying. I kept trying. Basically, it felt like the door was closed. And then once Peter got there, he got me a gig wrestling Kurt Angle, as a stunt double for one of the members of One Direction. And that was like one of the coolest things I've ever done. That's another really long story too, but like, so basically I didn't hear from them again until Bob Ryder called me for that over a year later. And then trying and trying and trying and trying and trying. Didn't hear from them again until I think it was summer 2019. We wrestled Reno Scum on one of the Impact shows they taped in Hollywood.
Cool, cool. Thank you so much. If we do have a third interview, which again I'm hoping we will, we have a
Oh, we
lot to
will.
cover.
We will.
Your return to Impact. I definitely want to hear about that One Direction situation. Championship
Oh yeah.
Wrestling from Hollywood alone, there's so much. NWA, your tours to Japan, I really want to talk about. Dragon Gate USA, more PWG because there's a lot there. Honestly, you've done so much. There's so much to talk about, and I appreciate you offering your time. You're such a great guest. Good guy in general. You're always great to deal with, so I appreciate
Oh,
it.
you're sweet.
Thank you, thank you. And you were a guest. I believe you were number 7. Now you're number 13. Very lucky numbers
Ooh,
right there. Where can people
I
find
like
you?
it.
Let's hit the plugs.
Yeah, man, just make sure you guys follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Yuma Booma, YumaBooma. Obviously I'll be keeping you up to date on anything Rock Ness, Captain Yuma related, as well as all my toy projects. I mentioned my toy collection. I'm also a toy maker too, and I got some big stuff in the works. So just keep paying attention to those pages for all wrestling updates, and of course, adorable pictures of my handsome son.
And check out the NWA on YouTube. NWA USA, NWA Power. Make sure to buy a t-shirt at ProWrestlingTees.com. Is it slash?
Rockness, Rocknes.
There you go. And guys, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Armbars Sidebar, on Instagram at Armbars and Sidebars, and subscribe on YouTube at Armbars and Sidebars. Leave comments. I try to respond to every comment. Sometimes I miss them. The only time I won't respond is if you do some, hateful bigotry. That stuff's not going to get a response. But otherwise,
None
you
of that.
give your opinion. I don't care if it's good or bad. I'll always respond to it. And thank you for being a great guest. Thank you for offering your time and for just providing insight and loving pro wrestling.
Hey, thank you, man. Thank you for having me, and I can't wait to be back for a third one.
Awesome. Until next time, guys. Later.